The deployment bar hit 99% when my personal line buzzed. I never answer unknown numbers during a product launch, but the persistent vibration felt like a warning. I picked up. Miss Anderson? This is the fraud department at Sovereign Bank. We are initiating foreclosure proceedings on the coastal estate. The mortgage is 3 months overdue. I stopped typing. I don't own a coastal estate. The agent's voice dropped an octave. According to our records, you co-signed a $390,000 loan for the primary applicant, Brooke Anderson, my sister. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold. They hadn't just borrowed money. They had stolen my existence. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most daughters would have dialed home immediately, screaming for an explanation or begging for it to be a mistake. I didn't. I placed my phone on the desk and stared at the black screen. Panic is a luxury for people who can afford to lose. I opened my contact list and dialed Austin. He picked up on the first ring. Austin isn't just my best friend. He is a forensic accountant who finds money people try very hard to hide. Austin, I said, my voice steady. I need you at my apartment in 20 minutes. Bring your laptop. I think my identity has been compromised. He didn't ask questions. He just said, I'm on my way. By the time he arrived, I had already set up a command center on my dining table. 2 monitors, a pot of black coffee, and a silence so heavy it felt like pressure. Austin walked in, took one look at my face, and opened his computer. Where do we start? He asked. Everything, I said. Pull my credit reports from all 3 bureaus, cross-reference them with any public records linked to my social security number. It took 10 minutes to find the first crack in the dam. Then the floodgates opened. Ashley, Austin said, his voice unusually soft. It's not just the mortgage. He turned the screen toward me. My credit utilization was at 98%. There were 4 credit cards I had never applied for, all maxed out. $85,000, Austin read, spent over the last 18 months. I leaned in, scrolling through the transaction history. It was a map of my sister's life, the brand launch party at the Vineyard, the first-class tickets to Tulum, the designer wardrobe she tagged in every Instagram post. I had paid for all of it. Every comment, every moment of Brooke's successes was funded by debt taken out in my name. Then Austin pulled up the mortgage application for the coastal estate. Look at the signature, he said. I zoomed in. It was a good forgery, confident and sweeping, but there was a tell. The capital A in Ashley had a superfluous, decorative loop at the top. I stopped breathing. I had spent my childhood watching that specific loop appear on birthday cards and permission slips. It wasn't Brooke's handwriting. It was my mother's. For a moment, the room spun. How had I missed this? I manage multi-million-dollar budgets for tech conglomerates. I spot code errors in my sleep. Yet, for 7 months, I hadn't checked my own credit score. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't negligence. It was conditioning. This was the invisible chain I had worn my entire life. My parents had raised me to believe that the family unit was a sanctuary, a sacred circle where trust was the currency. To audit them would be an act of betrayal. They counted on that. They knew I was too loyal to look, too trained in obedience to suspect. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had weaponized my love to keep me blind. Ashley? Austin prompted. Do we call the police? I looked at the signature again. That loop on the A wasn't just ink. It was a confession. They didn't think I would catch them. They thought I was a resource. An infinite line of credit that would never ask for a receipt. I stood up and walked to the printer. No, I said, my voice cold. Not yet. Print everything. Every statement. Every transaction. Every forged document. I want 3 copies. Austin hesitated. What are you gonna do? I watched the first page slide out of the printer tray. I'm going to dinner. The drive to the coastal estate usually took 2 hours, but I made it in 90 minutes. The rain battered the windshield, blurring the dark outlines of the pines, but my vision had never been clearer. This wasn't a family home anymore, it was a crime scene. I pulled up the long gravel driveway. The windows were glowing warm and inviting against the storm, a perfect stage set for the lie they were living. I walked through the front door without knocking. Laughter drifted from the dining room. I followed the sound, clutching the dossier against my side like a weapon. They were seated around the mahogany table, Joseph, Angela, and Brooke. A congratulations banner hung crookedly over the fireplace. Brooke was raising a glass of champagne, glowing in the light of her ring light. Ashley? My mother, Angela, was the first to spot me. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes tightened. We didn't know you were coming. We're celebrating Brooke's brand launch. Grab a plate. I didn't grab a plate. I walked to the head of the table and dropped the stack of documents in front of my father. The heavy thud silenced the room. I know about the mortgage, I said. My voice was calm, almost conversational. I know about the $85,000 in credit card debt, and I know about the forgery. Joseph picked up the top sheet. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted a board meeting with a trivial complaint. He adjusted his glasses and glanced at my mother. I told you she'd get a notification eventually, he muttered. Then he looked at me. Sit down, Ashley. You're making a scene. I'm not making a scene, I corrected. I'm making a police report. Unless you can explain why my signature is on a loan I never authorized. Brooke rolled her eyes, sipping her champagne. God, you're always so dramatic. It's just paperwork. It's federal fraud, I said. My father sighed, interlacing his fingers. Ashley, look at the big picture. Your credit was sitting there, idle. You weren't using it. We simply reallocated the family's available resources to the sector that needed it most. I stared at him. This was the logic of a parasite. In his mind, I wasn't an independent person. I was a subsidiary of the parent company. My assets were his assets. My credit score was just another account he felt entitled to manage. It was a narcissistic calculus where my autonomy was a rounding error. You stole from me, I said. We invested in your sister, my mother interjected, her voice sharp. Brooke needed a runway. You have a high-paying career. You have stability. Hoarding that capacity when your family is struggling isn't just selfish, Ashley. It's ungrateful. We raised you to be part of a team. A team? I repeated. You forged my name. You tanked my credit score to buy handbags and fund a lifestyle she can't afford. It's branding, Brooke snapped. You wouldn't understand. You're just a tech drone. I'm building an empire. You're building a criminal record, I said. Joseph stood up then, his face darkening. That is enough. We made an executive decision for the good of this family. You are part of this family, which means your resources belong to the collective survival of this family. You should be thanking us for handling the logistics so you didn't have to be bothered. The gaslighting was breathtaking. They honestly believed they had done me a favor by bypassing my consent. They hadn't just crossed a line, they had erased it. I looked at them, my father, the failed businessman playing patriarch, my mother, the enabler with the forgery pen, and Brooke, the black hole where all the money went. You're right, I said. I am a tech drone, which means I know how to audit a system. I turned to leave. If you walk out that door, my mother warned, her voice trembling with manufactured rage, don't bother coming back for Christmas. You are tearing this family apart over money. I opened the front door, letting the cold sea air rush in. I'm not tearing it apart, I said. I'm liquidating my position. Leaving the estate felt like exiting a decompression chamber. The air in my car was lighter, thinner. I didn't drive home. I drove straight to Catherine's office. Catherine is a fraud litigation specialist who eats white-collar criminals for breakfast. Austin had called her while I was confronting my parents. She was waiting for me, a pot of tea and a legal pad ready on her desk. You look like you've been through a war, she said, not looking up from the dossier I had sent her. I just declared one, I replied, sinking into the leather chair. What's the damage assessment? Catherine spun her monitor around. It's worse than we thought. The Heritage Property REIT your parents set up? It's a shell. A ghost town. There are no properties. No assets. Just a series of wire transfers going into offshore accounts and, surprisingly, a high volume of cash withdrawals. I frowned. Cash? Who withdraws that much cash in 2024? People who are paying off debts that don't come with receipts, Catherine said grimly. Gambling, maybe. Or loan sharks. But that's not the worst part. She clicked open a new tab. It was a list of investors. I expected to see banks, venture capital firms, maybe some of my parents' country club friends. Instead, I saw names I didn't recognize. Dozens of them. Who are they? I asked. I ran a background check, Catherine said. Most of them are retired. Average age, 68, and almost all of them are members of the local 402 Ironworkers Union. The room tilted. My father's old union? Exactly, Catherine said. These aren't wealthy investors, Ashley. These are pensioners, retired welders, pipe fitters, mechanics, people who worked with your father for 30 years. I felt sick. My father wasn't just stealing from me. He was cannibalizing his own history. He was robbing the men who had stood beside him on picket lines, men who had trusted him with their life savings. Why? I whispered. Why would they trust him with that kind of money? Catherine slid a glossy brochure across the desk. It was the prospectus for the Heritage Property REIT, and there, on the second page, was my face. A professional headshot taken from my LinkedIn profile. Underneath it, a glowing biography. Ashley Anderson, Senior Tech Executive, Chief Financial Strategist. And a letter. Dear friends, I am personally overseeing this fund to ensure maximum returns for the community that raised me. It was signed with my name. The nausea was overwhelming. They hadn't just stolen my credit. They had stolen my reputation. They had turned me into a lure. Every retiree who had signed over their pension had done so because they thought I was watching over it. My success, the career I had built with 18-hour days and 0 handouts, was the bait in their trap. They weaponized me, I said, my voice shaking. They used my good name to rob grandfathers. Yes, Catherine said softly. And now we have a choice. We can treat this as identity theft and get you cleared, or what? Or we can go nuclear. We can treat this as a RICO case, organized fraud, but to do that, we need a witness from inside the investor pool. Someone who can testify they were sold the fund based on your involvement. I stood up. The sickness in my stomach was hardening into something cold and sharp. I know who to call. Be careful, Ashley, Catherine warned. Once you open this door, you're not just suing your parents. You're sending them to federal prison. I looked at the brochure again, at the fake smile they had plastered over their crimes. They didn't just cross a line, Catherine. They burned the bridge while people were still standing on it. I walked out of the office. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the city. I didn't go home. I drove to the Union Hall. The Union Hall was a brick building on the industrial side of Seattle, a relic from a time when the city built ships instead of software. I parked my car and walked inside. The air smelled of stale coffee and sawdust. A group of older men were playing cards at a folding table. One of them looked up. Can we help you, miss? I'm looking for Mr. Henderson, I said. A man in a faded flannel shirt stood up. He had the kind of hands that had been broken and healed a dozen times thick, scarred, capable. That's me. I walked over to him. Mr. Henderson, my name is Ashley Anderson. I think you know my father, Joseph. His face darkened. I know him, and I know you. Or at least, I know your picture. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded, crinkled brochure. He handed it to me. Seeing it in person was worse than seeing it on a screen. The glossy paper felt heavy. My face smiled up at me, confident and reassuring. Invest with confidence. Invest with family. He told us you were the brains behind it, Mr. Henderson said, his voice raspy. Said his daughter was a big shot at a tech firm. Said you built the algorithm that was going to double our pensions. He showed us your LinkedIn. Showed us articles about your product launches. He said, if Ashley is touching it, it's gold. I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and sudden. I didn't know, I whispered. I didn't know he was doing this. Mr. Henderson looked at me, really looked at me. He saw the designer suit I was wearing, the fear in my eyes, the way my hands were trembling around the brochure. We figured, he said quietly. About a month ago, the payouts stopped. Joseph stopped answering his phone. We started asking around. Some of the guys wanted to go to the police, but Joseph, he kept saying, don't worry, Ashley is fixing it. Ashley is just reallocating the assets. He laughed, a bitter, dry sound. Reallocating. That's a fancy word for stealing, isn't it? Yes, I said. It is. I looked around the room. These men weren't faceless investors. They were the people who had built the bridges I drove over, the buildings I worked in. They had spent 40 years welding steel and breathing fumes so they could retire with dignity. And my father had taken that dignity and cashed it in for a country club membership and a failing influencer brand. The guilt I had been carrying, the guilt of betraying my family, of being a bad daughter, evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard rage. It was a clarity so sharp it cut. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice steadying. I am not fixing the fund. The fund is gone. But I am going to fix this. How? He asked. Money's gone, isn't it? The money is gone, I admitted, but the assets aren't. My parents have a house. They have cars. They have accounts they think are hidden. I know where everything is. I took a deep breath. I need your help. I need you to testify. I need you to tell the police exactly what my father told you. He hesitated. Joseph was a friend. We worked the same line for 20 years. Joseph stole your life savings, I said. He didn't treat you like a friend. He treated you like a mark. And he used me as the bait. Mr. Henderson looked at the brochure one last time, then crumpled it in his fist. What do you need me to do? I'm gonna set a meeting, I said. I'm gonna tell them I'm paying off the mortgage to save the family name. They'll come running. I need you to be there. Just me? No, I said. You. And the FBI. He nodded slowly. I'll be there. I walked back to my car. The city lights were blurring in the rain, but I didn't feel lost anymore. I pulled out my phone and dialed my father. Ashley? He answered on the second ring, his voice wary but hopeful. I'm ready to talk, I said. Meet me at my office tomorrow at 10. Bring Mom and Brooke. We're going to settle this. I knew you'd come around, he said, the relief in his voice sickeningly palpable. We're family. We fix things. Yes, I said. We certainly do. The boardroom at my tech company is designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a table that seats 20, and a view of the Seattle skyline that makes you feel like you're standing on top of the world. I sat at the head of the table, waiting. Austin sat to my right, his laptop connected to the main projector. The screen was currently black. At 10 o'clock sharp, the elevator doors opened. Joseph walked in first, strutting like he owned the building. Angela followed, clutching her designer purse, and Brooke brought up the rear, texting. They looked relieved. They looked like people who had gotten away with it. Ashley, Joseph boomed, extending his hand. I didn't take it. Let's get this done. I assume you have the check? Sit down, I said. They took their seats, the leather chairs creaking. Brooke put her phone on the table, screen up. Can we make this quick? She asked. I have a meeting with a brand rep at noon. My voice didn't waver. You won't be making that meeting. I nodded to Austin. He hit a key, and the screen behind me flared to life. It wasn't a settlement agreement. It was a flow chart. At the top, Heritage Property REIT. Below it, a web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and cash withdrawals. And at the bottom, a list of names. Local 402 investors. The air left the room. Joseph froze, his hand halfway to his water glass. Angela went pale. What is this? Joseph whispered. This is the paper trail, I said. This is every dollar you stole, every signature you forged, every lie you told. You hacked my accounts, Joseph accused. Standing up. This is illegal. I'll sue you. Sit down, I repeated, my tone hardening into concrete. You're not suing anyone. Because we're not done. Austin clicked to the next slide. It was the prospectus. My face, smiling above the fake endorsement letter. You used me, I said. You used my name to rob the men you worked with for 30 years. We were going to pay them back, Angela cried. It was an investment. The market just turned. It wasn't an investment, I said. It was a Ponzi scheme. And you used me as the bait. We're family, Brooke shouted. You can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm introducing you to the people you hurt. I pressed a button under the table. The boardroom doors opened. Mr. Henderson walked in. He wasn't alone. Behind him were two men in suits, federal agents. Joseph's face crumbled. The arrogance, the bluster, the entitlement, it all evaporated, leaving behind a terrified old man. He looked at Mr. Henderson, then at the agents, then at me. Ashley, he begged. Please. Mr. Henderson walked up to the table. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just looked at Joseph with a profound, quiet disappointment. You told me she was fixing it, Joe. You told me she was the golden goose. Joseph stammered. I just needed time. You're out of time, one of the agents said. Joseph Anderson, Angela Anderson, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. And Brooke Anderson, the second agent, added, moving toward my sister, for receipt of stolen property and conspiracy to commit fraud. Me? Brooke shrieked. I didn't do anything. I just spent the money. That's the crime, I said. As the agents handcuffed my parents, my mother looked at me. "How could you?" She wept. "We gave you life. And you tried to sell it," I said. "You tried to sell my future to pay for your mistakes. That ends today." They were let out, a parade of shame, marching past the glass walls. I stood there, watching them go. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to feel happy. Instead, I just felt a deep, exhausting relief. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was clean. Austin closed his laptop. "It's over." I looked at Mr. Henderson. "I'm sorry," I said. He shook his head. "Don't be. You stood up. That's what matters." I turned to the window. The rain had stopped. The city was shining below, washed clean. I was alone, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't lonely. I was free. The sentencing hearing was brief. Federal courts don't tolerate theater. The judge read the charges and the verdicts with the dispassionate tone of someone reading a grocery list. 8 years each for wire fraud and identity theft. Brooke, 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service for conspiracy and receipt of stolen property. Her influencer career was dead before it started. No brand touches a convicted fraudster. I stood in the back of the courtroom as the bailiffs led my parents away. My mother looked back once, her eyes searching the gallery, perhaps for a sympathetic face, perhaps for me. I didn't look away, but I didn't wave. I just watched. There was a profound, quiet grief settling in my chest, not for the parents I was losing, but for the parents I had never really had. I grieved the illusion. I grieved the little girl who believed that love was unconditional, not a transaction. But grief, I learned, is just love with nowhere to go, so I gave it a destination. 6 months later, I stood on a stage in San Francisco. The auditorium was packed. Behind me, a giant screen displayed a logo, the Glass Ledger Project. "Synthetic identity theft is the fastest growing financial crime in America," I said into the microphone, "and 30% of it is committed by family members. We call it familial fraud, but really, it's just betrayal with a different name." I clicked the remote. The screen changed to show a simple, elegant dashboard. This is the Glass Ledger. It's a free, AI-driven platform that monitors credit reports for minors and vulnerable adults. It detects patterns that traditional banks miss: the subtle, slow bleed of a parent using a child's social security number, the quiet siphoning of a pension. It doesn't just alert you to fraud, it connects you to legal aid, forensic accountants, and therapists who specialize in financial trauma. I looked out at the audience. In the front row, Austin was smiling, giving me a thumbs up. Next to him sat Mr. Henderson, wearing his best suit. We had recovered 80% of the union's pension fund through asset seizures and insurance claims. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to keep the lights on. "I built this because I know what it's like to be the architect of your own destruction without even knowing it," I continued. "I know what it's like to trust the people who are supposed to protect you. And I know that sometimes the only way to stop a cycle of abuse is to build a wall of transparency so high no one can climb over it." The applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar. I felt a lump in my throat. I hadn't just survived. I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had taken the wreckage of my life and built a shelter for others. After the speech, as people lined up to ask questions, Mr. Henderson came over and shook my hand. "Your dad," he said gruffly, "he built buildings, but you built something that lasts." "Thank you," I said. I walked out of the conference center into the cool night air. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Glass Ledger app. New user registered. Alert level safe. I smiled. My parents were in prison. My credit score was recovering. But more importantly, I was no longer the silent signature on someone else's loan. I was the author of my own life. And for the first time, the ledger was balanced. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your family and protecting your integrity? Share your story below. QA report.